The first sign was the cold. A biting chill snaked into my bedroom, rousing me from a dreamless sleep. My breath formed wispy clouds in the darkness. Something was wrong. I could feel it, a prickling unease crawling up my spine. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs like a captive bird. It was then I saw it. A figure, shrouded in shadows, stood at the foot of my bed. It wasn't human, not entirely. The air around it shimmered, as if the very heat was being leached from the room. My blood ran cold. Fear, primal and suffocating, gripped me in its icy claws. I was paralyzed, unable to scream, to move, to even breathe. The figure glided closer, its form shifting and swirling like smoke in the wind. Whispers, faint and chilling, seemed to emanate from it, weaving their way into my mind. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the whispers only intensified, growing louder, more insistent. Each syllable sent shivers down my spine, each word a threat. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The room was plunged into an unsettling silence. The cold lingered, a ghostly touch on my skin. I lay there, frozen in fear, until the first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in my curtains. That's when I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that whatever I had brought back from Bali, it wasn't content to stay hidden any longer. Bali! The mere thought of that island paradise sent a tremor through me now. What had I been thinking? It had all seemed so innocent then. An exotic holiday, a chance to escape the dreary English winter. The air thick with the scent of incense and spices, the vibrant colours, the friendly smiles. It had all lulled me into a false sense of security. We'd spent our days exploring ancient temples, their weathered stones whispering tales of forgotten gods and ancient rituals. But it was the markets with their dizzying array of exotic goods that truly captivated me. Silk, spices, intricate carvings, and amongst them, tucked away in a dusty corner, the mask. It was a thing of unsettling beauty carved from some dark, heavy wood. The features were grotesque, almost demonic, frozen in a silent scream. Despite its unsettling aura, I was drawn to it. The shopkeeper, a wizened old man with eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets, had warned me. "Be careful," he'd rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "This one, it holds a spirit, a powerful spirit." I had dismissed his words as superstitious nonsense, but as I held the mask in my hands, a shiver ran down my spine. It felt strangely alive, as if pulsating with a hidden energy, and yet I couldn't resist its allure. Against my better judgment, I bought it. I brought it back with me to England, tucked away safely in my suitcase. I had no idea then, the darkness I had invited into my life. Bali welcomed us with open arms, or so it seemed. The air hung heavy with the perfume of frangipani and the distant thrum of gamelan music. It was intoxicating, disarming. My boyfriend Tom was enchanted from the moment we stepped off the plane. We spent our days exploring the island's verdant rice terraces, their emerald slopes cascading down to meet the sapphire sea. We wandered through bustling markets, a kaleidoscope of colours and scents, haggling for trinkets and sipping strong, sweet coffee. At night we dined on fresh seafood beneath a canopy of stars, the gentle breeze carrying the murmur of the waves. It was idyllic, almost too perfect. But beneath the surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a prickling unease at the back of my neck. The Balinese people, though unfailingly polite, seemed to regard me with a wary curiosity, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I dismissed it as my imagination, a touch of traveller's anxiety perhaps. I was in a foreign land, surrounded by a culture I didn't fully understand. It was only natural to feel a little out of sorts. Besides, Tom seemed oblivious to my unease. He was utterly captivated by Bali, his usual cynicism replaced by a childlike wonder. It was in Ubud, the island's cultural heart, that I first encountered the mask. We were exploring the labyrinthine alleyways of the art market, a treasure trove of handcrafted goods. Silks shimmered like rainbows, intricately carved wooden statues stood guard, and the air was thick with the scent of incense. I paused, drawn by an unseen force to a small, unassuming stall tucked away in a shadowy corner. The shopkeeper, a stooped old man with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom, sat cross-legged amidst his wares. He looked up as I approached, a flicker of recognition in his gaze. My eyes fell upon the mask. It was crafted from a dark, heavy wood, the grain swirling with patterns that seemed almost alive. The features were grotesque, almost demonic, frozen in a silent scream. Two hollow eyes stared back at me, lifeless yet somehow filled with a malevolent energy. I felt an immediate connection to the mask, an almost magnetic pull. It both repelled and fascinated me, sending a shiver down my spine. I reached out, my fingers tracing the rough contours of the wood. It was then that the shopkeeper spoke, his voice a low rasp that seemed to slither through the air. "Be careful, Tuan," he whispered, his words barely audible above the clamour of the market. "That one, it holds a spirit, a powerful spirit." I looked up, startled, my hand instinctively withdrawing from the mask. The shopkeeper's gaze was intense, his eyes boring into mine with an unsettling intensity. I tried to laugh it off, attributing his words to local superstition. "A spirit?" I chuckled, picking up the mask again, pretending to examine it with amusement. "Surely not. It's just a carving." But even as I spoke, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The mask felt strangely warm in my hands, as if pulsating with a life of its own. The old man simply nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Perhaps," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "But be warned, Tuan. Some spirits do not like to be disturbed." He looked away then, his gaze drifting to some unseen point in the distance. It was as if he'd said all he needed to say, and any further warnings would fall on deaf ears. I hesitated, my grip on the mask loosening. A part of me, the rational, sensible part, urged me to put it down and walk away. But another part, a darker, more primal instinct, was captivated. I wanted the mask, needed it even, as if it were a missing piece of myself. And so, ignoring the shopkeeper's warning and the growing unease in the pit of my stomach, I bought it. The flight back to England was a blur of exhaustion and a strange, lingering disquiet. I tucked the mask away in my suitcase, nestled amongst our other souvenirs, but it felt like a live thing, radiating a subtle energy that I couldn't ignore. Tom, bless his soul, remained oblivious. He chatted excitedly about our trip, his voice a stark contrast to the unsettling silence I felt growing within me. Upon arriving home, the familiar comfort of our little London flat felt different. A subtle chill permeated the air, even with the heater on. The silence, usually peaceful, now felt thick with unspoken tension. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to jet lag and the stark contrast from the vibrancy of Bali. Tom, thankfully, remained his usual self, unpacking with gusto and already planning his next project. His normalcy was an anchor, a reminder that life went on, that perhaps I was simply letting my imagination run wild. I busied myself with unpacking, relegating the mask to a high shelf in my study, hidden away in the shadows. Out of sight, out of mind, I hoped. Yet even as I attempted normalcy, a prickling sensation lingered at the edge of my awareness. It was as if something had followed me home, an unseen presence lurking just beyond the veil of my senses. Sleep offered little respite, my dreams plagued by unsettling images, shadowy figures, whispering voices, and the haunting gaze of the mask's carved eyes. The first sign, the one I couldn't rationalize away, came a few weeks later. It was a quiet evening, Tom engrossed in his latest novel, the only sound the gentle crackle of the fireplace. I sat in my armchair, attempting to lose myself in the newspaper, but an unnerving feeling of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, like a breath of wind through dry leaves, coming from the wall behind me. It was a fleeting sound, easily dismissed as the old house settling. Yet my blood ran cold. I strained to listen, my heart pounding against my ribs. The whisper came again, a touch louder this time, a string of syllables I couldn't quite decipher. Fear, icy and sharp, gripped me. I spun around, my eyes searching the wall, but there was nothing there. "Everything all right, dear?" Tom's voice cut through the silence, his tone laced with concern. I forced a smile, attributing my reaction to a sudden chill. Yes, quite all right," I replied, my voice a shade too high. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The whispers continued intermittently, always faint, always just at the edge of hearing. I tried to convince myself it was the pipes, the wind, anything but what my gut told me was true. Something was trying to communicate, and the thought sent shivers down my spine. The unsettling events escalated subtly at first. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in strange places. A book I'd left on my bedside table would end up on the kitchen counter. My favourite pen vanished from my study, only to turn up in the garden, nestled amongst Tom's prized roses. At first I blamed it on absent-mindedness, the inevitable consequence of a life spent in contemplation, but the occurrences became more frequent, more brazen. One morning I descended the stairs to find the furniture in the living room rearranged. Chairs were overturned, the rug askew, as if a struggle had taken place during the night. Tom, ever pragmatic, attributed it to my clumsiness, suggesting I'd bumped into things in my sleep. I couldn't bring myself to confide in him, to voice the growing dread that coiled in my stomach. How could I explain the feeling of being watched, the sense of an unseen presence that lingered just beyond my peripheral vision? The whispers in the walls intensified, sometimes morphing into guttural growls or chilling laughter that seemed to come from the very air itself. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams became vivid nightmares filled with grotesque figures and the haunting eyes of the mask. I would wake in a cold sweat, the feeling of unseen hands brushing against my skin, the echo of whispers clinging to the edges of my sanity. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving me in a perpetual state of unease. Whatever I had brought back from Bali, it was making itself known, and a terrible premonition told me this was only the beginning. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the study walls. It had become my only solace, the warmth, a feeble attempt to chase away the pervasive chill that had settled over our home. Tom, bless his heart, remained oblivious, attributing my growing unease to a particularly nasty bout of flu. I puffed on my cigar, the sweet, acrid smoke a temporary distraction from the growing terror that gnawed at my sanity. As I exhaled, my gaze fixed on the swirling tendrils of smoke, my mind playing tricks in the firelight. For a fleeting moment, I saw it, a face forming in the smoke, grotesque and menacing, its eyes burning with an infernal light. It was the mask, I realized, its features replicated in the smoke with chilling accuracy. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me staring into the flames, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I rubbed my eyes, attributing the vision to fatigue and the lateness of the hour. But deep down, a primal fear whispered a different truth. The spirit, the entity I had so foolishly brought back from Bali, was no longer content to lurk in the shadows. It was making its presence known, weaving itself into the very fabric of our home, of my mind. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I found myself questioning my own sanity. The dining room was shrouded in darkness, the only light emanating from the street lamp outside, casting long, eerie shadows across the table. We were having dinner, Tom and I, attempting a semblance of normalcy amidst the growing unease that permeated our lives. I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite non-existent. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, a constant murmur just at the edge of hearing. They seemed to be everywhere now, slithering through the walls, whispering from the shadows, a chorus of voices vying for my attention. Tom, bless his oblivious heart, chattered away about his day, his voice a jarring counterpoint to the cacophony in my head. I tried to focus on his words, to anchor myself to reality. But my gaze kept drifting to the empty chair at the head of the table. It was then I felt it, a cold spot directly in front of the empty chair, a sudden drop in temperature that sent shivers down my spine. The air grew thick, heavy, as if an unseen presence had entered the room. I could feel its gaze upon me, cold and calculating, sending a wave of primal fear washing over me. My breath hitched in my throat, my fork clattering onto my plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Sleep, once a refuge, had become a torment. The nightmares were relentless, each one more vivid, more terrifying than the last. I would wake in a cold sweat, the echo of ghostly whispers clinging to the edges of my sanity, the feeling of unseen hands brushing against my skin. One night the dreams took on a new intensity. I found myself back in that dusty market stall in Ubud, the scent of incense heavy in the air. The old shopkeeper, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and warning, held out the mask. "You should not have taken it," he rasped, his voice echoing in my skull. "You cannot escape what you have invited." I tried to scream, to run, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The mask seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, its carved features contorting into a grotesque mockery of a smile. "We are bound now," a voice whispered, seemingly from within the mask itself. "And soon you will be mine." I woke with a gasp, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room in an eerie glow. My gaze fell upon the door to my study, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that the mask was calling. A strange compulsion drew me from my bed, my bare feet soundless on the cold wooden floor. I walked towards the study, each step filled with a growing dread. The whispers in my head urging me forward, their voices a hypnotic siren song. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling, a sense of foreboding washing over me. This was madness, I knew, but I couldn't resist. I had to see it, had to confront whatever darkness I'd unleashed. A chill, more profound than any I had felt before, greeted me as I pushed open the study door. The air hung heavy, thick with an unseen energy that crackled with malevolent intent. The scent of incense, out of place and cloying, filled my nostrils, transporting me back to that dusty market stall in Ubud. Moonlight sliced through the darkness, illuminating the mask. It sat on the table, an island of dread in the sea of shadows, its grotesque features twisted in a silent scream. But it was the eyes that drew my gaze, held me captive in their hypnotic sway. They seemed to glow with an inner light, burning with an unholy fire that sent shivers down my spine. I moved towards the table, each step an act of defiance against the growing terror that threatened to consume me. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex of madness. They taunted me, mocked my fear, urged me to embrace the darkness that beckoned from within the mask's hollow gaze. My hand, as if guided by an unseen force, reached out to touch the cold, unyielding wood. The moment my fingers made contact, a jolt of pure energy surged through my body. It felt as if time itself had stopped, the world around me fading to a muted blur. I was no longer in my study, no longer in control. The mask had me now, its power flowing into me, corrupting me, changing me. The whispers, no longer a cacophony, coalesced into a single voice, ancient and powerful, resonating deep within my bones. It spoke of forgotten gods, of rituals designed to appease the spirits of the dead, of sacrifices made to maintain the delicate balance between the mortal realm and the ethereal plane. My hands, no longer under my control, lifted the mask towards my face. I felt no fear now, only a strange sense of inevitability, a perverse curiosity to see what lay beyond the veil of sanity that was rapidly tearing. The mask's cold wood pressed against my skin, its contours fitting perfectly over my features. The world exploded in a kaleidoscope of colours and sounds. Visions, fragmented and terrifying, flooded my mind. I saw swirling mists, grotesque figures dancing in the firelight, and heard the chilling laughter of spirits long forgotten. It was a glimpse into a realm beyond human comprehension, a place where shadows held dominion and madness reigned supreme. And then silence. The visions faded, the whispers died away, leaving behind an emptiness more profound than any I had ever known. I stood there, the mask still upon my face, my body a vessel for an entity far older, far more powerful than I could have ever imagined. It was inside me now, a part of me, its essence woven into the very fabric of my being. I tore the mask from my face, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The study swam back into focus, the familiar scent of old books and pipe tobacco grounding me, however tenuously, to reality. But something was irrevocably broken, a line crossed from which there was no return. The whispers, though fainter, still lingered at the edge of my awareness, a constant reminder of the darkness that now resided within me. I could feel its presence, cold and calculating, lurking just beneath the surface of my thoughts, waiting for its moment to re-emerge. I stumbled to the mirror, needing to see, to confirm that I was still me. But the reflection staring back was a stranger, my eyes hollowed, my features gaunt, a haunted look etched upon my face. The mask lay shattered on the floor, its power not contained within its wooden prison, but unleashed, set free to wreak havoc upon my world, upon my sanity. Panic welled up inside me, a primal scream trapped in my throat. I had made a terrible mistake, a foolish error in judgment that had cost me everything. I'd brought back more than just a souvenir from Bali. I had invited a nightmare into my home, into my very soul, and there was no escape. The spirit was with me now, a part of me, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that it would never let me go. The days that followed were a blur. I told Tom I was unwell, confined myself to the study, desperately seeking answers in ancient texts, in whispered prayers to forgotten gods. The mask lay in pieces, yet its power remained, a suffocating presence within the confines of our once peaceful home. The whispers never truly ceased, a constant murmur at the edge of my perception. They shifted, transformed, morphing from guttural warnings to chilling laughter that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Sleep offered no sanctuary, my dreams a terrifying dreamscape, where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. The spirit, the entity I had so foolishly brought back from Bali, had become a part of me, its essence woven into the fabric of my being. I felt its influence in every thought, every action, a constant shadow lurking just beneath the surface of my sanity. The fear, once a visceral wave, settled into a dull ache, a constant companion that chipped away at the edges of my resolve. Tom, bless his kind heart, tried to understand, attributed my erratic behaviour to a mysterious ailment. But how could I explain the unexplainable? confess to the darkness I had invited into our lives. How could I bear to see the fear in his eyes, the pity that would surely cloud his gaze? And so I bear this burden alone. The spirit remains, its presence an unwelcome guest that has overstayed its welcome. I have learned to coexist with it, to navigate the treacherous terrain of my haunted existence, but the fear, the knowledge of what I have unleashed, never truly fades. Perhaps it is a penance, a consequence of my arrogance, my disregard for the warnings whispered on that distant island. Or perhaps it is a reminder that there are forces beyond our comprehension, ancient powers that lurk just beyond the veil of our perceived reality. I share my story now, not for sympathy, but as a cautionary tale. We are but visitors in this world, our time here fleeting. Let my experience serve as a reminder to tread carefully, to respect the boundaries between the known and the unknown. For there are some doors that, once opened, can never be closed, and some spirits that, once summoned, will never truly depart. Have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain, felt the icy touch of the unseen world? Share your stories if you dare, for in the sharing perhaps we can find solace, a flicker of understanding in the face of the unknown. But be warned, some secrets are best left buried, some spirits better left undisturbed. For the darkness listens and it remembers.